Hello.
Hi, I did it. I actually let you in.
I don't know if you can control the settings, but you can get rid of the passcode and the waiting room if it's an option on your end. Because if they're trying to join, they'll have to look back at their email to see the passcode. I don't know if that's something that Dennis controls or you can still.
I don't know. I had a passcode, but then I got into it right away with launching it. I didn't have a problem.
Usually it does. Usually
and they got in last time with the same thing, so same system. So I haven't done anything yet on my Apple ID. It's on my list, my everlasting list, and my car went crazy with all kinds of messages of electronics going wild. So I think that's just a gas cap that was loose. But anyway, it's always something. But I will tap you as soon as I get that, app on, or ability to put apps on. What are you up to?
Oh, I've got a assignment due for class next week that we have to have partners for something. So I'm trying to figure that out right now.
Welcome, Krista.
Hi, Evan. Hi, Carla.
Hi. So you're taking time before your event. That's nice.
Yeah, I'll listen in. But I got through some good to-do list items this morning.
That's
so
great. Just to let you know, this is recorded. I get it from our town manager, and I don't know how to control the recording anyway until we actually start the meeting. So you're on.
That's all right.
Yeah. So how long can you stay on? Usually it's about an hour or so, maybe less. I don't know.
For this,
yeah, because we'll make sure that we cover our plans forward. Hi, Mary Ellen. The only one we don't have is Dusty on. Have you met Dusty, Krista? He's our.
I've heard about him.
Yeah. So he's going to join us as well. And Marty had some appointment this morning, but he'll be on to Marty Fox. I think he was part of our group when we first started meeting in Wisconsin.
Yeah, and I'm happy to just listen in and anything specifically Island Institute planning grant related. And then also I had the chance with a colleague of mine who had reached out to the Woolwich Communications Committee, met with a member of our broadband team this week, so I can kind of update.
Yeah, that's great. I knew they were going to, so because I've been in touch with Allison trying to drum up potentially a bigger group. Dresden, finding somebody in Dresden's been hard, who might take a leadership role. So we got Marty. The only person left is Dusty. Hi.
Sorry I'm late.
Oh, that's okay. Krista joined us.
Got back from the dentist appointment. They were running late.
I asked you to do something for mapping, but I actually did pull it down. Maybe you did too, Evan, what the latest numbers were for our speed tests. Krista, we were trying to get some business at the polls doing speed tests, but we'll get to that on the agenda. But and maybe give it another minute. Maybe we should start with things like speed tests that Dusty's not particularly involved with right now, and he can join us. Marty's going to be back in a sec. Yeah, I was looking at your planning grant, and it asks a lot. So far, we only have 3 members and Dusty on the committee, and just in turn, we can come back to this when he's on. But of course, I have a group that I mobilized before the pandemic. It's just in terms of who's going to really carry it. I think you've got who we are right here in terms of a leadership on it, and with Dusty as the select board rep. But I'll just jump in. I did reach out to Willard Morgan, and he's still recuperating from Lyme. I had forgotten about that, but he said he'd check in January. because I'd love to get him on the board. And I don't think I personally haven't made any other inquiries for people. We can come back to this when Dusty's on, but if you ask how many board, how many involved people, you know, and at this point, we're restarting it, but what would really restart it is jump-starting the ability to organize and get out there. And personally, I'd love to get some money to put some hours into the organizing piece particularly. Is that something that grant would do?
Yeah, I think, again, just that's kind of vague. And so specifically mapping those activities and who and how, right, how the town would, or the committee would match any resources that come in through a planning grant. But I think just being a little more specific about what kind of capacity. And I guess this is also, you know, all these conversations are kind of parallel to possibility of additional capacity coming to counties or regions, not necessarily by county lines, but regions through some plans, you know, to launch some new programming from the NBC in coming months. It's all TBD, but I think that right, there's some leveraging opportunities when it comes to that question of how committees like the Wiscasset committee gets funding for additional actual technical support and capacity might be better to kind of time as we know some of the opportunities that are already in the pipe for regional coordination.
Right. Here, I'm going to stop you now because Dusty has joined us. Dusty, I don't think you've met Krista Thorpe. She's at the Island Institute, and she has worked with us before pre-pandemic and is back on working as a liaison with Wiscasset. We're just jumping in ahead of agenda until you got on, tapping her. She's part of the Island Institute team putting on the broadband conference this afternoon. So I just want to make sure I had some of that detail. We're going to come back to that, Krista. I have asked people to make sure that they let me know or keep track of time, because at one point a couple of weeks ago you said that time could be a match for the grant. And so I'm assuming if you have to leave, let me know, because we're going to come back to this conversation. But what I had on the agenda, I think you got it. The one thing I didn't put on the agenda was basic housekeeping that we have to do as a committee. And one of them is taking minutes. The recordings that you do, Evan and Damascotta, won't count for Wiscasset. They want minutes because that's what's in the committee handbook. So could somebody take minutes? I'm looking at potentially you or Marty.
Sure,
And they don't have
I'll
to
take
be
some
extensive.
minutes.
They don't have to be extensive. We just have to document it so that we put it on the record. And I guess I'll go back and look at some of the recordings so I can put some minutes together for the two sessions we had that we didn't do minutes, and we'll get them on the town website. The other thing we're supposed to do is have officers for our little committee. And de facto, I guess I've sort of jumped into the chair role if everybody wants me to continue to do that. And I forget, I know we're supposed to have a secretary, which would take minutes. And I assume if we ever have any money the committee is spending, we're going to need a treasurer. So I don't know, Evan, do you want to continue taking minutes?
Sure.
Kind of roll. Okay. And maybe at the
I'll be
end.
the treasurer.
Okay,
There you
that's
go.
great. That's
Not
great.
that that's
Officers-
difficult.
officers fulfilled.
So we got our officers.
I like money.
That's good. This is great. And Dusty, I'm assuming you don't want any of this responsibility right now, correct?
Yeah, I think the liaison has got my hands full.
Yeah, okay. And let's come back at the end of this in terms of time schedule for meetings, or maybe setting up the next meeting time. I'm sorry, I was confused about time or didn't keep track of all the responses I was getting on email. Let's review the agenda. Why don't we start with the speed test? We did get some bumps from being at the town meeting. I mean, at the voting at the polls a couple of weeks ago. And I did look and see that the numbers that you had sent out, Evan, to the group based on the mapping at Connect Me, we had, I think, 6 more. We're at 92 right now. And hopefully we can do even better. I don't think, aside from the polls, I don't think we've had an extensive outreach doing, or unless anybody's doing something that I don't know about. We were going to try to get it into the paper. I think, Evan, you were going to contact, who's the news person, Kevin, somebody at the Wiscasset paper. Is anybody? Mary Ellen, do you
I'm
know?
not sure for Wiscasset.
Yeah. So it could be Kevin Burnham or one of the local reporters, Susan Johns, either one of them. I'm sure Evan's got their email addresses. But Susan would be all over it. Kevin's the editor, so he wouldn't be covering the story.
Yeah, I did. Well, there's a story and then trying to get it in every page. Have you done your speed, each edition, have you done your speed test and reminding people? For some reason, I had a note that you had said you'd contact him, Evan. Am I putting too much on, or could you do that?
I can do that.
Just get it in. I did talk to Kathleen at the town. They do have on the website that we are looking for members. I asked her if we could put our speed test right on the front page, but she backed off from that. She said, well, we've got your notice, it's in there, but then people have to dig if they're going to go see the speed test. Dusty, I don't know if you've got any suggestions for that, but it would be great if they, right now, what pops up on the front page is the committee vacancies for our committee, and I forgot which other one. Marty, you're muted.
Energy.
Oh, it's for energy. Yeah.
I'm the only one who volunteered, as far as I know, but.
Yeah.
I also think that if you send it to Pat Cloutier, it could get in the chamber. The chamber has a newsletter.
I did send it to her.
Every 2 weeks. So I would try to hit them up as often as you need to, because they send out something every 2 weeks.
That's a really good idea.
Keep it rolling through the chamber. So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. By the way, have you met Dusty, right? You guys know each other? Yeah.
Well, we met pre-election, so I'm super, congratulations, Dusty, for winning your election there all those months back. So glad to see you on board. Yeah.
Okay. And then we did talk about, other groups in town, civic groups. I haven't done anything with trying to reach out. I think it's really important, however, just to get those numbers up and really figure out where our gaps are. That's what other towns have done. And it's the best information on where we really are compared to anything else. There are the churches, the garden club. I know Terry Heller has a good list of people she sends out to. I just haven't sent it out. Mary Ellen, do you have any other ideas where we could get?
Well, I do think the library is super important, and the rec center, whether you do it through, maybe they'd be able to do some Facebook posts, which are always so good and timely for people. But I think the rec center, the 2 churches, which are so important, they connect with a certain group of, really excellent group of folks in the library.
Okay. Yeah, we talked about this. I guess it's more taking the time to do it and just making those contacts, I think. But those are all, thanks for the reminders. And even though it's the holidays, maybe we could just keep blasting this out, trying to get participation. I don't know what other towns are getting. Did Damascotta get a big response when you put it out there, Evan?
Yeah, we've consistently keep on going up. So we're above like 15% participation, I think.
Oh, that's
over there,
great.
like 160.
Yeah, that's really good. So we got to get that one up. I did run into a neighbor down the street who's getting gigabit, he said, from Spectrum. I was surprised at that. I guess Spectrum offers it. I don't know how often he needs it, but he does do remote work at home, project management work. So, if you're willing to pay, I didn't ask him how much he paid, but I did urge him to take the speed test. I don't know.
You should ask him what his results were from the speed test and how much he's paying, just so that we've got better data, because the gigabit thing could be quite a fallacy.
Yeah. He's the only one I've run into so far at that level, except for a neighbor, a woman in town whose husband's a big gamer, and she said they just have amazing capacity. You know, they have big speeds they pay for it. They may be trying to get gigabit too. I'll ask her to. I'll specifically ask her to take the speed test. So I don't know. Is there any more ideas on getting those numbers up? Okay. I'm going to circle back to Krista and what's possible after we deal with some of these other agenda items, unless Krista has to leave. In terms of trying to get the other surrounding towns, it looks like Woolwich is moving forward. And Krista was talking about that before some of you were on. Allison Hepler has been an instigator. They have a communications committee there that will probably become the Broadband Committee. And they did have your colleague Krista at their meeting. I don't know how that went. You know, they're just starting. They haven't, I think they've got Comcast or Fairpoint there in terms of providing cable. So they've got a similar issue that Wiscasset has, but I think they have more unserved areas, as does Dresden. Is that your impression?
Yeah, I attended that meeting as well, and right, it's Comcast across town, and then just the little pockets of unserved, and so they're just learning for the first time about possible processes of learning how to figure out mapping themselves, do some infrastructure surveying, thinking about a community survey. I mean, we just kind of presented them with the community-driven broadband process and some options of first steps, which yeah, my colleague Emily will be working with them on.
Great. So Allison's very interested. She's a state legislator, so you know her time will disappear, I'm sure, once the session starts. But right now, she's started getting things going. And Dresden's a little bit more problematic. I don't know if you've been in touch with Dresden lately. The town manager is gone. I don't know if they've hired anybody else yet. I do have the list, Mary Ellen, you gave me, and there's one person that Jan Goranson, who owns Goranson Farms, suggested was Don Gleason. Is that a name you know? You're muted, Mary Ellen. You're muted.
Yeah. Sorry, I know he came to a meeting. I just can't place him.
Can't place him.
It's been a couple of years.
He was the most outspoken, and so I'm going to try to find him. I don't have a phone number for him, but I'll try to find him. I have an address.
Well, the other piece is though I appreciate you're looking for leadership, which I know
is looking for leadership. Yeah,
so important. But both Grace and Bob DeBoer, whose names are on those lists, they were the organizers of the meetings. And
okay. I didn't know that. Okay,
no, that's okay. They're quiet people who just new to town a few years ago, so just trying to do the good thing. I don't think they see themselves as leaders, but they also were the organizers. So if you want to sort of say hello to them.
Yeah. Do you have contact information for them? Because I have nothing on this sheet.
Did they not write on there? Okay, yeah, I do. Their name should be on that list. I apologize.
The name is on. I just don't have any contact information. But I'm glad to do that. And Paul Tunkel, who is new to town, was interested, and he's a retired Episcopal priest. Worked in Wiscasset for a while. So I'll do that, because I just think, Krista, our assumption is we're better off with more scale. Everything I'm hearing is do it in bigger numbers, both for funding and because providers will be more interested in working with us. Is that sync with what you know?
It just probably depends a bit on a lot of factors, I guess. But yeah, but I think that a message that does keep coming up, certainly as the state, starts looking at how to do more of a strategy around the disbursement of these big dollars coming in, federal dollars, is that the more towns that are already talking to each other and working regionally, the more the implementation of strategy will actually be able to happen on the ground. Because it's one thing if the state has these visions of regional coordination, if it's not actually happening on the ground. So I certainly think that, especially given that you don't feel Wiscasset is competitive at this moment as far as the number of unserved, homes just in Wiscasset, that talking regionally, working regionally, and I think that the Wiscasset, Woolwich, Dresden, Wiscasset and Dresden being in the same county means that there's been support through the Planning Commission, and then I think that hopefully, that the opportunity, it makes sense, right, for potential conversations with Woolwich as well, even though it is a different main provider. Does Wiscasset have any Comcast as well?
Don't
No.
think so, unless it's
I don't
like
think
right on the
so.
border, maybe.
Yeah, some people have it. Some people have,
Over on,
Do they
Mountain Road,
right on the road?
Meridian.
Yeah.
Hmm.
But I mean, I reached out because it didn't look like much was happening. And a former colleague lives there and says, what's happening? She doesn't want to lead it, but she's like, well, finally she's interested. So anyway. Okay, so we're just going to keep going on that.
Question on that somebody here may be able to answer. Who
Yeah.
would we talk to, is there any known prices for what it costs to run utility cables over like the Wiscasset Bridge and the Bath Bridge?
No, that's a good
Or
question.
who has that type of information? Because I think that's kind of
Mark Willett probably would. I have to contact him for other things. He's Axiom, and Mark is the one that's done all the small islands that nobody else wants to touch, like Southport. And I think he was doing, or he was going to do Arousik.
I think that's a big thing to bring up, why those
Yep.
three communities make a lot of sense rather than like Woolwich and Bath or Wiscasset and Edgecombe, just because we're geographically isolated. And I think that there's a fairly substantial cost to getting cable run over those bridges.
Yeah, and I know.
well, isn't there a fiber optics cable going across the bridge?
Yeah, probably,
You
but
still,
whoever the-
it's a 3-ring binder, but you still have to, there may be other things, right? It could be Tidewater, I'm not sure, but you still have to pay for it and buy that service, so.
Yeah, well, Tidewater's going down to Bodenham, so I'm sure that they're linked up somehow across the bridge. I know it was an issue for GWI to come in and do some of the smaller towns that they didn't want to deal. They did Islaho, not Islaho. The other one, the one that's
Islesboro?
But in general, they did not want to do island communities. It was just too much without enough. In Islesboro, they were getting everyone in town involved. So I think Mark would know that. I'll follow up with him and just ask, what those kinds of costs are. I think you're right. We need to know that. And I didn't get, Dusty, you were asking about the 3-ring binder and just understanding how you connect and what the limitations are. Maybe Krista knows this. I mean, I know we have it running right through Route 1, but it is expensive, and we don't. I guess we just want to know what some of the barriers are using the 3-ring binder as far as that goes. But and you asked in chat about LCI, and no, we haven't. I don't want to assume immediately that we don't have the advantage that Bremen and Newcastle and Damascotta did of why LCI might be the right choice. There's a cost advantage there. They don't serve this community, except for they put in cable for they hooked up the town office and the county office. So I think as we get going, we will want to consider everything, in terms of where we're at on infrastructure.
well, and just some of those practical questions about the 3-ring binder, et cetera, could also be answered by LCI, or, Alan can at least talk to those points. And I also think that LCI has interest in Dresden because of needing to kind of make that connection back to Bodenham that they built out. So just hearing about their strategy, and certainly, LCI will want to be hearing what Wiscasset is thinking. So just having an early conversation might might clarify. And Evan, of
Yeah.
course, is working, has been in communication with them through the other Lincoln County projects as well.
Right. I know they came and presented to Wiscasset before the pandemic. I mean, I think we had a number of groups that talked with us before the pandemic, but not since the pandemic. Anything else? We're going to circle back again to the funding after this. Dusty, I mentioned before you got on, I jumped ahead in terms of additional committee members. I did reach out to Willard Morgan, who you've met from Chewonki, and he's still dealing with Lyme disease. But he said in January, you know, circle back, and I think he'd like to be part of the committee. He couldn't do the school committee either. Anyway, he's still on my list. We do have 2 openings posted on the website, the town website, that we said were vacant. I haven't heard anybody making an application that I know of when I checked last time. So I don't know if anybody else wants to suggest somebody to who else we should approach. And we had a good diversity, I think, before the pandemic, but a lot of people are really busy. And the question is, could you, you know, at this stage, tie up Terry Wood's time, who is the superintendent, or somebody else? I don't, you know, just trying to think who else came. Ed came. At one point we talked about Ed, whether he'd be interested. I don't know, Dusty, in your travels, meeting everybody in town, whether there's somebody that you think would be good for this committee.
Nobody comes to mind. I don't travel probably more
Oh.
than anyone else does.
Yeah, it just sounded like you were reaching out to a lot of people, so maybe a fresh look at all this stuff would be good.
As a
So-
young fellow, I'll have to check his name. He signed the petition for Owl Power, but he's from Peregrine. But if I get my petitions back, I'll find out his name. But he seemed like a very energetic young fellow. He's been working for them for about 1.5 years.
That would be good to get business representation.
Yeah.
And I mean, if Willard wouldn't do it, I know a guy who I've met a couple of times from Chewonki, who's a teacher, Andrew Hunter, I think it is. I mean, he might want to do it anyway, but maybe he could also be a Chewonki rep if Willard doesn't want to do it. So, well, let's keep that in mind. Let's keep looking for people, and it can be newcomers. I mean, you know, they may have the biggest interest. Krista, do you have other ideas about how people get
Well,
participate?
the Chewonki one sounds like it would help create an education connection. Another thought is whether there's any connection with the library, which tends to play, or libraries can play a very important role in digital inclusion, which might be an interest of this.
Yeah, that's on my agenda, actually. Richard, what's Richard's name? Anyway, down the street from me. He's the president of the Library Association. And I know I did want to talk to him about it because I know he thinks the library can be doing a whole lot more than it is digitally and with other stuff. So, you know, this might
Richard
be
Lutz?
the opportunity, and Pam Dunning is a select board member. So we really should check in. I think Richard, given that he's not on the select board, might, I mean, he may have some time, or at least provide information as a partner with us on that. We don't have anybody in the medical community either. We've got a couple of practices in town. I'm not sure we need it at this stage, given how busy everybody is, you know, in terms of the medical community. At one point we had a banker, but that didn't, I mean, participation was low even before the pandemic. So I think when we get closer to actually working on a particular plan, we should definitely broaden the representation in order to sell what we want to do. Anything else on membership?
Nope.
Okay,
Well, there were a few people in the group before the pandemic, not just Terry Heller, but some other fairly new business folks who landed in Wiscasset, Sarah Emery and a few other folks. I think Will Truesdale, who's involved with the Friends group. I could reach out to them totally informally and see if they or somebody else have an interest in connecting with you and talking about
Sarah's my next door neighbor, so I could certainly,
Okay.
and I know she
Okay.
has a digital business.
Okay.
And she works with Gab, I forget Gab's last name.
Yep. Yep.
Knowing, I doubt it. I doubt she would be an active member, but
Okay.
obviously they
Okay.
did come to one meeting. And Will did not come to that meeting, but maybe we could get him involved now post-pandemic, because is he still leading the Friends group?
Yes. Yep.
Okay. So that's a good, that's a good suggestion as well. The thing I really wanted to talk about was this, or at least have a little time on, is this potential digital equity initiative. And we've brushed on it the last couple of meetings. Krista, you weren't with us. And this was part of the idea of what keeps us motivated and going as we wait for our turn to apply for money, given the assumption that we won't be competitive right now, but we still need to move ahead with all the groundwork, including a survey. Oh, I missed the survey. Let me stop here. We do need to do the survey. And we have an example that Newcastle did. Do you have surveys that you've used, or Evan, did you base yours on stuff from Island Institute?
I basically based ours off the Newcastle one and New Damascotta.
Okay.
And Newcastle based it off of,
Yeah.
Bremen, who based it
Yeah,
off.
and I got other
I don't
ideas.
know.
I've got other ideas too about how to shorten it and, try to tighten up the questions. So,
Mhm.
and less open-ended so that we can anticipate things, stuff like that. But it's a very good starting point, that's for sure. And Dusty, on the on that, you were going to check in with Sarah to see if there were coordination. I also emailed her just yesterday because I didn't know if you had a response from her. We were talking about having a comp plan survey go out too, and whether it would be too many surveys.
Yeah, that one is currently, well, I don't know what's being done with it currently. A few months ago, they were still working on getting people to fill it out. So I haven't attended the comp plan meeting, so I don't know where it's.
Yeah, we haven't had any meetings for quite a while, since this summer. So they've been on hold. And she didn't get back to me. So I think we should just move ahead on our own, because we need to do this. And that's something I'm certainly willing to take another look at, of how to tighten up the survey.
Mm-hmm.
Try to get it out. I don't know if I doubt people will pay a lot of attention in the holidays, but maybe it could go out right after the holidays if we could get it.
Yeah, we
out.
could still keep it out till, for 2 months. So
Yeah.
just have to be December.
But I mean,
Dusty, could you figure out if the town has a Survey Monkey account that we could use?
Sure.
that would be good.
And whether or not we could send it out to their mailing list would be nice.
To the complaint, to which mailing list? Town
To
mailing
the
list?
town mailing list that
Yeah.
I'm signed up for getting the email, the agenda for the town and all that stuff.
Yep.
So that would be a good way to do it, use that.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, I guess what
Maybe we could use that for the
for the survey too.
800 number too.
You mean for the
I'm sorry,
the mapping
the mapping, I'm sorry.
speed test?
Yeah,
We
speed
could
test.
try. We could try and see if she'd do it there. I think
Well,
I've
you probably-
alienated her. I think maybe I haven't been as timely as I should be, but I'm going to try to be much better at what I have to do as a committee person.
Yeah, you probably have to
do
go
that.
work through Dennis on that.
Yeah. And Krista's just saying we can write in the cost of Survey Monkey into any grant application that we want to do.
Also, Carla, as you probably surmised, most towns have also mailed it out to everyone. Which
Oh,
is,
so that's-
it's a cost. It's definitely a cost, but that way it gets to people who, are not as quick or handy or don't have the.
Or don't have internet.
Right. So it's an extra cost, right?
Right.
But
And I gathered, Krista, that could be part of a grant to put it in there. We could start with online and then we could follow up with, assuming we had the money or the town put up the money to do it that way. So that would be good.
So in the planning grant, could we include hiring Evan to do some of the work? I mean, he's doing work for Newcastle and stuff.
Right. That's what I was hoping, that we could get Evan to pay attention to this he's paying attention, but really pay attention on the paid basis. Is that something that's possible?
Yeah, the technical support capacity piece. Again, this is what I was alluding to earlier, that there might be parallel conversation about just the regional work that, Evan's already engaged in work across the county. And so we're kind of coming up to a place where does it make sense for individual committees to be writing in a grant, or for there to be a wider community, a wider regional application for technical support. And certainly I think of Evan when I imagine that role, but it's two questions. It's the question of, is there, you have capacity, does Evan specifically have capacity to work with these different towns, or would the towns be willing to, are the towns willing for his time to be not, focused on their projects individually so much as wider regional work? And then with that, there might be, if you wait a little longer, there might be some clarity on whether there's additional funds that could leverage the Island Institute planning grant when it comes to that technical support person. And I'm talking about kind of the yet to be formed connectivity boosters program. And so
I don't know about that one.
You're right. And that's because it's so early, but on the other hand, once it develops, it's probably going to develop fast, and it's through Maine Broadband Coalition somewhat, but Island Institute is involved in helping kind of form a program that looks statewide at this lack of capacity issue and how to inject some funds from,
I haven't been on, I need to get on their regional committees, the advisory committee, because now that the policy work I'm not on. Anyway, I don't know what's happening anymore. I got to get back in the know. So
I think because of Andrew's transition to the Maine Connectivity Authority, what had been happening was just conversations kind of at the executive committee level that haven't necessarily filtered out even to advisory committee. So the point being, that's all beside the point. Short answer, yes. Thinking about some specifics as far as hours and capacity and compensating this important work that your committee needs to get done. Right, start drafting a planning grant application, and if it seems strategic to wait until there's some more answers to actually submit it, and for it to speak to the regional more than just the Wiscasset, then TBD. But for now, just focus on what your needs, what actually needs to get done that can't be. The Island Institute Planning Grant kind of aims to help committees think through what can you do with your volunteer power first, what's happening at the volunteer level, and then what is the barrier, what piece of work do you run up against that just won't happen without some funding assistance.
But it's also a question of speeding up the work.
Yep.
I mean, maybe we could do this on a volunteer level and drag it out, but it will get done a whole lot faster if we have somebody focused on it. And that would be my argument why we should just do it and try to take advantage of the amount of money coming in at this point.
Yep.
It's an incredible opportunity.
And that would be a perfect little paragraph to put as the rationale for your budget in a planning grant application.
Yeah, we also have to think about what the town might put up financially as well as our time. And maybe we can circle back to that discussion of town. They do want a budget, our projected budget for the committee for next year. I finally read this stuff. And certainly this would be the biggest piece of what we might want for the next year, is some kind of financial match.
Good, yeah. And I was going to ask if you had a budget in the works, because that was Bremen's mistake, was never really getting a broadband committee budget, because we were doing things on a volunteer basis, didn't foresee, needing a budget necessarily, but then little things came up, even in the implementation, even in the build out of the broadband network. The committee realized that with this little tool to shoot string through conduit, we could speed up the process. And, committee members started volunteering to do some pre-work for Tidewater, and we had to go to the select board because we didn't have a budget. So I'm glad that you're thinking about.
How much did you end up putting in the budget for you were already into deployment, but.
No, so Bremen actually has yet to, I think that
Right,
now
right.
coming up in the next cycle, even though the if broadband's built out, we're actually wanting to kind of have Broadband Committee 2.0 focused on digital inclusion, and would like to have some budget there to, just to strategize around funding, subsidies, increasing affordability, things like that. So anyway, getting a budget in the town book early is a good idea.
So we're at least what I'm thinking of, what we've talked about, given that we're probably not going to be first in line on this new money immediately, is starting with digital equity inclusion, which is less expensive than broadband infrastructure. And there is a lot of money with the new infrastructure bill coming in. I think it was 2.75 billion nationally coming in for digital inclusion. Maine will get some of that. I expect Susan Corbett will be in line to get a bunch of that. Susan Dusty heads the National Digital Equity Center, which the national headquarters is in Mary Ellen's office.
That's right. That's right.
So I've been in touch with her. You may not have seen it, but I forwarded some documents of what they're proposing lately on digital inclusion. One is they've been training volunteers and community to work with people on their digital skills remotely. And I guess that's worked fairly well for them. And they would propose a volunteer training program as one thing. I did, Mary Ellen, send her what she did in 2019. And she said, that all has to just be updated because they're on top of stuff. The second thing they're doing, and this is where the libraries and, other community facilities come in, maybe the rec center, is that they're doing what do they call it? I sent it out to you. I've got it in my piles.
Partner on-site classes.
Yeah, the on-site classes, particularly for the people that don't have access at home, and they do have to go on site. So the library would be number one, in my opinion, for something like that, but maybe the senior center as well. She'd be happy to work with us on this. In my mind, it doesn't make a lot of sense for us to replicate this if we have an expert in town whose national center is here. The question is how much money it costs to get Susan to work with us if we think this is a priority. I think we have to do the survey work first and find out how much interest. I mean, what she doesn't do, she doesn't do a lot of the groundwork to find these people, from what I can understand. There's still a gap of who really needs this and how do you reach them. And they do have a digital navigator that works on the whole program, and that person helps connect people they've already pinpointed who don't have access to devices or can't afford it. But somebody has identified those people to come forward. That's helpful because I asked about navigators. You'll see it in my email that I sent out. I don't think I sent it to you, Krista, but you already know all this, I think, from Bremen. I sent it to Mary Ellen yesterday. And so she would, that's her job to do this stuff and work with communities. And she's a national expert. So she also said, if you're interested in working, we could look at terms of what this costs. Do you have a sense of what it costs? You probably had this discussion.
Yeah, I don't directly, because she, one of the communities in the last year and a half or so that NDEC did a digital inclusion plan for was Searsport, and my colleague Kendra Joe was the person from our team interfacing with Searsport. But I did see the digital inclusion plan that ended up being, NDEC does a very comprehensive kind of community specific digital inclusion plan based on the anchor institutions and partners you have there. And once you have that in hand, you could then use that digital inclusion plan to apply for potentially these federal funds coming in to
Right.
support digital inclusion, or include that digital inclusion plan in a Maine Connectivity Authority future rendition of, if there's something like Connect Maine, a grant making for infrastructure that continues to be available, communities have to have a digital inclusion plan to apply for that. So I think, typically we'd say it's possible to come up with your digital inclusion plan, again, just utilizing your own partnerships and everything. But I think Wiscasset is unique in that you have that physical presence of NDEC. So it could be a chance for them and for you to take that digital inclusion plan to the next level as far as implementation, compared to maybe what they've done for other communities, which is really just more of a consultant role. I think that Island Institute planning grants involved in working with, helping Wiscasset work with NDEC to come up with a more like concrete implementable digital inclusion plan is a cool opportunity in Wiscasset.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, Susan, you can highlight it here where you're based. So yeah, we're on the same wavelength on this. And so I think, I don't know, other people's opinions about this. I mean, none of it's easy to implement, but it seems to me we get a short-term hit on something that's really, really important, digital equity and inclusion, and just reverse the priorities that most of the groups who are applying have at this point. Other people want to jump in?
I don't have anything constructive to add other than, yeah, great. It's great that they're in our backyard, so we should definitely use it.
Yeah.
And I would make sure that you have multiple people, or at least one from your committee attending, as I know Evan will be, but the digital inclusion session, and you will be too, Carla, that Susan is doing at the Maine Broadband Summit. And then Friday, I'll be moderating a panel called Social Justice Requires Broadband, and it's also really centering digital inclusion. But when it comes to specific marginalized populations, or some of the have-nots in broadband, so the panelists will include Preston Thomas from Four Directions, who works with Wabanaki peoples. And one thing that they're really struggling with when it comes to the money available for tribal members in Maine is that you have the people on reservation who are kind of easy to reach, and funds can just be funneled right to this one geographic location. But there are tribal members all over the state, and I'm sure in Wiscasset, a town as big as Wiscasset. So I think part of that conversation is just going to be like, how do you actually get a sense of who in your community are being left out. We'll also have a panelist from Maine Family Planning, and then Karam from GWI will be on that panel. So that conversation, I think, could be a good chance to take some notes on, the community level, how you figure
recording? Is that one is tomorrow?
That one's tomorrow. Everything will be recorded. And
okay, so we can, I know I have some conflicts later tomorrow morning, so good. I'm glad it's all recorded. So I think, would we like to have Susan attend our next meeting of this group? Because if she can do it, is that something that would be useful for us to just have we can download her information. I sent it to the committee, look at it, and then maybe chat more. What I worry about, and I don't know from your point of view, Krista, the volunteerism
Right.
Everybody wants volunteerism. I went through this when I was focused on aging issues about 10 years ago.
Mhm, mhm.
And people are in and out of it. I mean, it's not as dependable. And that's what I worry about in terms of a model based on volunteerism. And obviously you couldn't, I don't know how much money is going to be available and whether, you know, what can go where down the road, but that's a question I have. The other thing is that we could also certainly look for the holes for people that are working. I know, Dusty, you've had a particular interest in employment and remote work and the ability to do that. And some of the technical skills and the referrals might be around people that really need better skills for working. Now they provide the skills, but there may be a particular focus in what we try to do in Wiscasset on that issue as well. But I think it could all be part of this digital inclusion piece that we're putting forward. I don't know.
I think it's a good idea to invite Susan and just hear, you know, what would a partnership with NDEC to develop a digital inclusion strategy for Wiscasset entail? You know, just that basic question, because that could potentially help start filling in some pieces of the cost, for instance, for a grant. And then I think that the workforce piece would definitely be one that could attract, you know, important funding and attention down the road. Maine Community College System is launching a remote work for Maine, remote work for me program this coming year that basically trains Mainers in the digital skills they need to do high value work from home. And it's a little more than the NDEC classes, which are kind of on discrete
Right.
literacy topics.
That's good to know. I didn't know about that.
Yeah, well, that's all just the kind of stuff that certainly Susan would, or NDEC, whoever would be involved in helping, would have access to a lot of that information. They work through partnerships, but it would, yeah, or potentially having the capacity, the technical support, funding someone like Evan to do some of that, really the research, because there's so much like just on the horizon.
Yep.
So we should think about that as we're tailoring our survey, both on the side of availability of bandwidth and infrastructure, but also the questions on digital equity to be in the forefront of what we do on that survey, I think, and not miss that opportunity.
I know this is a very small point, but some of those questions at the end of the surveys typically ask people whether they'd like to get any training in a variety of topics. And if you could look at how to refresh those questions, because most of the people said no, and so that's not what you want to hear. So please look at those questions about, do you want to take marketing or WordPress or something like that? I forgot how they're all worded, Carla, but see if you want to refresh those and make them more specific, because after hearing people's desperate stories for wanting better broadband, they didn't care for any classes. That's not what I wanted to hear 5 years ago or 4 years ago. So.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So see what you can do. Yeah.
Okay. And Krista, you had a question?
I was just going to say I agree that those questions need refreshing, and that there's so much more you can ask on a community survey to really get at the digital literacy needs. But both on the side of interest in learning or interest in having one-on-one tutoring, and interest in being a tutor, being a volunteer, like this community survey could be a good opportunity to actually potentially start building a volunteer base to implement some of NDEC's programs. And I agree that volunteers, that can really obviously be a challenge. It's always the same people who are overstretched, as all of you are, showing up to everything in your civic duty. But I have noticed that the tech tutoring, when happening at a good anchor institution, at a library, tends to be something that tutors really enjoy and stick with. I mean, St. George has had a strong Tech Tuesdays program for several years where every week people are there to help people with their devices and stuff. So
It's great.
yeah, I think you can, especially if you get people who are from the IT sectors who don't get to like, I'm not blanketing IT sector, but necessarily do like meaningful human connection work. It can be nice to transfer those skills.
Well,
to
I actually asked Susan in my email to her, another one, that, do you ever use teenagers? I said, they've just got this stuff built in their DNA, you know. She said, no, everybody's 18 and older. So I mean, I don't know about that, but a lot of the kids, at least pre-pandemic, had to do community service projects. So maybe that's an angle. Maybe it's too short a time to really develop a relationship and, you know, have the longevity that you might want. But anyway, all this stuff is good. And where are you guys at on your digital equity program in Bremen? Are you going forward thinking, putting together a plan or funding, or just curious?
We're going to have a forum in early January to see if we can kind of refresh the group who's leading this work, partly because the Broadband Committee of 5 has been working for 2 years, and every home is about to be connected before Thanksgiving.
Kudos to you guys. That's great. That's
yeah,
great.
and so there's kind of there's this new wave and opportunity of work that the people on the committee aren't necessarily the right people for, or if they're like me, they're just ready to step back and be a supporter and not be, you know, front and center in it anymore because we have other things going on, which, and so we did meet, 2 committee members met with Alan, Hinsey, and Randall from Manning from LCI to actually talk about, you know, start talking about what town funding involvement in, whether it's subsidies or just funding pilots of smart infrastructure, emergency infrastructure, some telehealth projects, like that. There's just, it's not just the affordability of your monthly rate, it's just this whole world opens up when you start talking about digital inclusion and opportunities to improve lives through the infrastructure. So we're trying to work with Tidewater and LCI on that, because they kind of committed to working together with the town on digital equity as part of our Connect Maine grant. So I think that the public-private partnership aspect of it will continue in Bremen.
That's great. So we've got a fair amount to do, and I think we probably, we haven't been scheduling. Do other people have comments or input or other things you want to bring up? I think that's all I had on the agenda, except for meeting dates and what we need for a timeline to get this done. Anything else? So I'm suggesting maybe we meet, is it too soon to meet the week after Thanksgiving? That would be the week of the 29th to start getting some of this in place. Do you have a deadline on your grant? I mean, I don't know if we can make December.
It's rolling.
It is rolling. I doubt we're going to make December, especially if we want to know what the town's going to put up, if it, you know, or what our matches will be. Is that first week or maybe the second week before, you know, after, what is that? The first week of December, second week of December. Do any of those times work for people?
December 9th. Do we want to look at that?
Yeah, I mean, I can send out a doodle, but if you already know, that might be helpful.
Well, I don't foresee us getting too much done through Thanksgiving, so the week after seems a little quick. So I was thinking the week after that, the 6th to the 10th week. And the 9th.
I've got it wide open. Do we want to try for another 11 o'clock on the 9th?
It's okay with me.
Okay,
Okay with me.
great. And terrific if you guys can join us. I mean, I'm just copying you on this stuff, and if you can join us, that would be great.
So how do we determine a budget for the town? Because that has to be done pretty soon. If
I don't know.
'cause they're gonna be working, on a budget, their budget, so
We
we
could-
need
we
to
could-
get something together probably before the end of the year.
Yeah, you're right.
When you say Dusty, or you're not sure?
Yeah, I'm not sure about how committees spend money yet, or what.
Well, we could ask Dennis that this is the issue and we don't know, but they revise budgets periodically,
Right,
if necessary. It's not going to be a huge amount of money that we would need for match or that we would ask at this
Right.
point.
And I think that we should be lobbying for the next budget cycle for some of the cable, what do they call them, subscriber fees,
Yeah,
Oh.
because that's just being rolled over into the general fund, and that doesn't make any sense at all from a,
Right, right.
That's right. You mentioned that before, that could be a good source.
yeah,
for the
and it's
town.
already committed for this year, but for next budget cycle, we should at least be lobbying for a piece of that.
Good idea.
Okay. Okay, so we will revisit these topics if anything new. Should I see if Susan could join us that day or another
Yep.
day that week? And just put out options.
Yep, go ahead and ask about the 9th.
Okay. Sounds good. Well, have a good Thanksgiving, everybody.
Awesome, I'll have the minutes out in just a minute.
Yeah, I knew you were a better person to do.
Haha.
All
All right, see everybody at the summit.
Yeah. All
Hey,
right.
thank you.
Take care. Thanks, Kristen. Thanks, Mary Ellen. Bye.
Bye.